Hello, thank you for joining us. A fantastic preview ahead. We had a busy game week 1, we're now into game week 2, and we start with the Friday night game. Friday night football is back. It's kind of a newish concept. We've seen a few games played on a Friday evening, but this is the first time the league are consistently having games held on a Friday night. And the first game this season is Aston Villa versus Manchester United. Historically, an interesting fixture, albeit one United do very well in. We'll come on to that a little bit later on. But a man who I know has been doing very well, fresh off the back of success on his tips last week for us all, is Gio Mackie. Good evening, Gio.
Hello, how you doing?
Gio's one of our OOBG members and will be giving his tips and insight on this particular game. Obviously, it's difficult. We've come to the start of a new season. We've had one competitive game for each club so far. Gio, just very briefly, Manchester United, I don't know how much you caught of them. I was a bit disappointed by how they played against Spurs and probably overestimated what I thought they'd do. What was your view on United at the start of the season?
It's a bit of a boring game. I did watch the game. I thought Tottenham were actually a better side until United scored. I think they were quite lucky that they got that break because Tottenham kind of handed it to them on a plate a wee bit. But they did okay. They weren't troubled too much, but I think Romero is maybe a bit questionable so far. I wouldn't fancy him being their #1 keeper for sure.
No, and obviously there's going to be a lot of discussion around goalkeepers to come with Manchester United. I'll leave that up to their fans. I hope, from the Premier League's point of view as a neutral, De Gea stays. He's a fantastic keeper. But there's a lot of water to go under that bridge. Villa, meanwhile, I watched the Villa game, so I'll give a bit of a view on it. I thought they were a mad price at one point in running to beat Bournemouth. The game was pretty close end to end. Bournemouth went off pre-match favourites. Tim Sherwood, we mentioned on the relegation preview that his team could be involved again. I think he fought really astutely and got a very well-organised team. A couple of players stood out for me, and it was Gabby Von Horlock back to not his best, but getting there, and Scott Sinclair as well. It's easy to look at the goal scorer, really just had a good game, but Scott Sinclair has impressed a lot of people in pre-season, and as a Palace fan, I can remember him playing for us at a young age. He looked like a real talent. Do you see Villa getting anything out of the game, and do you think that front line can do it?
Yeah, I think they might get something here. I went against the favourites last weekend and it paid off big time. Despite you quoting me stats not to oppose Chelsea. I think they might get something here. I'm not a big fan of Villa, as you know, and I'm not a big fan of Sherwood, but I'm not a big fan of Man Utd either, and that's going to sway me tonight.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the odds on the screen there now. You're looking at best price for United around the 1.67 mark. Bear in mind, United are away. You've got the draw price at around 3-1. And then Villa, arguably a big price at 5-1 at home in the second game this season against the United side that will still be finding their feet. I know, Gio, we're not going to necessarily tie down too many bets tonight. We're looking at this way ahead of the match, but you must be mildly interested in the Villa price at that. Do you think we're starting to get to a price that's tempting you?
It's a huge price, I think. The last 12 away league games for Man U last season, they only won 4 of them, and they only had 3 clean sheets in their last 7 away, and that was to Hull, Newcastle, and QPR, 3 teams who were at the boot of the table, and it doesn't really inspire me that. And then, as we've already mentioned, they've had that goalkeeping change. I think Villa's going to score. I'm quite confident about that, to be honest. What do you think, Sam?
Yeah, and I suppose a lot of people don't just use the traditional bookmakers for cashing out. You use the exchanges as well. And you'd have to say if Villa could take a half-time lead in this game and impress in the first half and really press against the United team, the one thing Villa are going to have is pace in space. Scott Sinclair, Gabby Von Horlock, Gustet's not necessarily the quickest, but he's up there with those creative players. And Tim Sherwood will not play 5 in midfield against Manchester United at home. He will go for a win. And at this stage of the season, he can afford to. So I think will make this a great spectacle. And I'd be looking possibly at the overs market, looking at over 2.5 goals. I'd be looking at perhaps even Villa to score the first goal and catch United a bit unawares. Against Spurs, I felt United grew in patches in the game. They didn't necessarily get out the blocks that quickly, but then they did come into their own. I think they could be a bit sluggish, especially away from home. You've got players that haven't played in the Premier League before. No matter how good they are, it's a completely different league to what they're used to. So for me, listen, it's very easy to sit here and call something value because it's a bigger price than it should be. But if Villa can take the lead, you're going to be sat on a potential winning cash out, exchange bet, whatever you like to call it, before you're even having to worry about the outcome of the result. It will be a close game. I don't think United are going to hammer them. If you want to back a favourite that weekend, I don't think United are the most solid of the favourites. But what I would say is you can understand probably why when we bring up the head-to-head record shortly, why they are so superior. Does that previous meeting record worry you? A lot of people talk about it. I knock it because I turn around and say, well, these are two different 11s from last season. Do you think it's worth taking into account?
I don't know. I try not to look too much into things like that because there's circumstances that's happened in the past that's no longer happened. You look back then in 2013 and that's too far. I think that's too far back in the past to look at in terms of how they're going to perform on Friday night. So no, I don't. Do you take that into account, Sam? I don't really take head-to-heads into account all that much.
Do you know what? It depends. If you look through this, I mean, I haven't done it, I must confess, but if you looked at that team back on the 22nd of April 2013, both sides, how many surviving players are there still in that squad? If it was they played 5 times in the last 12 months, I'd probably be a bit more tempted to look at the records. For me, I don't buy into this hoodoo or, you've seen Spurs do it against Chelsea for years. You say, oh, Spurs will never beat Chelsea, blah, blah, 3-point lane, all that. Spurs went and put 5 goals past them last season. You can't. Modern football is too different to use a head-to-head record like this, and I personally think this is why bookmakers have priced up how it is, because they look on history as much as between teams, as much as they look at existing squads. And I think they've maybe missed that a tiny bit. I'm not saying Villa have got a better team than Man United, they haven't. But have they looked like they've got a better gelled side that could possibly take something from the game? Yeah, I think so. And you can see the man pictured. Gabby Bongo was the man that scored the goal in the last time Villa managed to snag a victory, and that was away. So, what does that say? Why are we worrying about Villa's home record? Cup games, though, it's difficult, isn't it? I wouldn't ever factor in cup games. For me, there's going to be a couple of key players in this. We fancied Wayne Rooney in the last Man United game to nab a goal. He didn't do it. He came pretty close, to be fair, till Kyle Walker decided to put the ball in his own net. Do you fancy Rooney maybe back in that central striking role, or having seen him last weekend, you weren't convinced?
He's very short, though, isn't he? 4-1. He's quite short for an away striker. I don't fancy odds like that. Skinny and a first goal scorer. You can get an anytime goal scorer for that for a striker at a lesser side playing a bigger side. Villa strikers are probably 4-1 score any time. He should have scored last week. He should have buried that before Walker even got near him. But I think he obviously thought he had a lot more time than he did.
I pointed out to you in a quick chat off air regarding Villa away at Bournemouth, and I was quoting you the price of their strikers. Now, appreciate Villa at home, but they were playing Bournemouth, and Bournemouth was something like 14-1 first goal scorer. Sinclair was about 18-1, and instead I think it was a 9-1 shot. At home to Man United, you expect them to be probably a similar-ish price, maybe a couple of points shorter. That's huge, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think if you were to keep taking prices like that through the season against big sides, I think you would make a profit. If obviously you'd have to choose wisely, but one correct page 10 games, and that's a lot considering there's only 38 games in the season. So you only need 4 right in a season to be in profit. But you just have to get a bit lucky, I guess. But yeah, I think one of my tips here. I've got Villa scoring in the first. We'll come on to that, but I've got Villa scoring first.
Interesting. Well, you've got the head-to-head record stats on the page now. Appreciate we've cribbed it in some way, saying, oh, we're not so sure that previous meetings are that important. But Rooney clearly enjoys playing against Villa and scoring. 3 in the last 3 for him. He will be looking to get a quick start this season. It must be in his mind that this upcoming summer's tournament for England, one of his last chances to be the leading man, he's going to start having people like Harry Kane on his tail. When you factor in a World Cup, it's going to be another 2 years on from that. Did you see him in the right positions enough against Spurs to make you think he will be a 20-goal-a-game season striker?
I'm not sure. Jury's still out. He was a lot of people in the LBG forum tipped him for top goal scorer, and it's something I've stayed away from because I tend to look for massive prices on the Golden Boot award, if you like. But I think this is his chance because I think Man U are going to get a striker before the transfer window shuts. So if he wants to play up front, he's got to prove it this week and next week before someone else comes in. He didn't do it last week for me, but as I said, he's his own worst enemy. He was back defending again last week. It's just the player he is, and it's something I admire from him.
Well, we get Canvas opinion from a couple of different United fans, and one that we'll be getting on one of our upcoming shows fairly soon is Tommy Buckley, and he was saying that, for what he thinks, he doesn't think it's going to be a huge. He's a United fan, so you can expect him to think United are going to do well. But he's saying he thinks it's going to be 2-0, 2-1. He doesn't think it's going to be a landslide to United. He's very interested, and he thinks United's away record could possibly be a bit of an issue. I wouldn't say Villa Park's going to be the most intimidating place to play. What I would say is that record of Villa only keeping 2 clean sheets in 15 meetings between them isn't going to get any better under the way Tim Sherwood plays. I'm not saying that means United have got a better chance of getting a result. What I am saying is Man United are going to probably find themselves under more pressure than they used to. I mean, they drew, probably said, 8 games away last year, which is a lot for any team in any position of the league. And it's the difference between winning, losing, relegation, whatever you want to call it. Do you think, you're pretty confident here, aren't you, that Villa are going to get a goal?
Yeah. Like I said, that's more based around Man U's performance last weekend. But also, the one stat I do look at, though, is managers against certain teams. And I've looked at Tim Sherwood. He's not been in management a long time. He's only been in charge against Man U twice. And they were both away from home. With Tottenham, he won 2-1. And with Villa, he lost 3-1. But to me, that says he'll go out and attack Man U with his team. Whether it's Villa or Tottenham, he'll attack Man U. His team scored in both the games, so I'm happy to take Villa to score Friday night. Whether they get someone from the game or not, iffy. Depends what Man U turns up. I think it's more about which Man U turn up rather than which Villa turn up.
It's interesting because we've got Tommy obviously putting up 2-0, 2-1. We've got myself that's keen on the overs market. I see both teams going out there and trying to play football. And if Villa get that first goal, it could be fascinating. If Villa can go 1-0 up, United having to attack them, the pace that Aston Villa will have on the counter-attack, not many teams will have a front three that quick this season. I genuinely, I'm not one to look for upsets against big teams or anything like that, but it will be interesting to see how they go. So have you got anything else lined up or any other suggestions or predictions for this game, Gio, that you think we should do?
My one bet I'll have, because of the price, is 17-2 for it to be 1-1 at half-time. I like that price. I think, as you said, I expect Villa to come out the traps, but I don't think they're good enough to keep a clean sheet, and I think it's a matter of time before Man U score. So if Man U can score, and Villa obviously score in that first half, 17-2 for 1-1 at half-time, I think it's a score both managers would accept at half-time as well. I think they'd have that mentality of, right, let's get in at half-time at 1-1 and rejig things. So I'm happy to take that at 17-2. But failing that, both teams to score 21-20 with William Hill. If it was, I thought if it's better than evens or evens, I'm taking it. And it's 21-20, so that's going in my accumulator. Hopefully, boost my stake for the weekend, double it if you like.
Well, let's be honest, it's not going to be a boring game. You can't have a boring game on a Friday night to kick off the league. It's going to be interesting. Just really quickly, what's your views on these teams having to play on a Friday night? Keen on it or not?
No. From a fan's perspective, no. From an armchairs fan, yes, because Friday night I get to watch football. But I live in Aberdeen, so it's different for me. But for me, trying to get to a West Ham game on a Friday night, no chance. And I know there's a lot of other people in the same situation. They can't leave work early to get to it and stuff, especially if you're playing away from home. But it doesn't happen until next season. This is just a one-off Friday night thing because of the police. Yes,
it'll be interesting. That's very well pointed out, but it is upcoming, the Friday night games. And I bet you when they start having to move them around with World Cup, European qualifiers and European games, and obviously the Euros at the end of the season, I think we'll see a lot more different times of fixtures. It's just going to have to happen. Unless, of course, Sport or Europa League team will not have to play on a Friday night if they're playing on a Thursday. But thank you for watching, Gio. Thank you for your input. Tommy, yours as well. Hopefully we've pointed you in the right direction for some good value bets. Add your comments below. Subscribe to our videos. We're going to get loads more of these throughout the season. I'm going to point you to some winners. I must add, Gio has picked out at least 4 winners from the videos that we had on Saturday's games, and they weren't short prices. He was picking up things like Swansea to go well at Chelsea. He picked him at Evans to score a goal. A mad bet on reflection when you think about it. We will find you value on this programme. That's what we're here to do. We love your viewers as well. Tweet them in, comment and subscribe to the videos, and we look forward to your company throughout the season. Thank you, Gio, and good night.
Good night.